Before we continue, let's see if you know why we're using this light. So we've used a specific light to see the level of the water. Comment below and tell us why we would use that specific light to see the water level. And if you're correct, we will, and you're the first person, we will send you a bottle of mead straight to your door. Comment now. So one of the really fun things about making mead at home is that you can actually experiment with lots of different things. So we often experiment with different flavors, different things that we're going to add to it, usually keeping our combination of yeasts always the same. And what we've decided now is we're actually going to do it the opposite way around. We're going to keep the same honey, the same fruit or citrus, and we're going to change up the yeasts. So what we've done is we've got 5 buckets here, which we've sterilized, exactly the same buckets, exactly the same breathers. And what we've done now is that we've selected 5 different yeasts, which we're going to brew with, and keep the buckets in the same temperature and same environment for the same length of time. And then we'll see what difference the honey or the mead will have in comparison to one another. So some things that we've got to keep in mind is that all of these yeasts ferment at different temperatures. They have optimal fermentation temperatures. We often use bread yeast. That one doesn't have a specific fermentation temperature on it. But if you look here, we're going to try a cider yeast, which is a little bit unconventional, but we thought we'd try it anyway. And then we've got a premium wine yeast, which is mainly used for red wines, and then also champagne yeast. And you'll see here on the back of them, they will all tell you what the optimal fermentation temperature is. So on the cider yeast, it's 12 to 28 degrees. On the wine yeast, it's 16 to 24 degrees. And on the champagne yeast, 18 to 32 degrees. Now, it is winter here, so it has been quite cold. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep all the buckets in the warmer area of the house. So they'll all be exposed to the same temperature fluctuations, and we'll test them as we go. So this should be quite fun. We're going to use, like I said, exactly the same honey in every single bucket, the same quantity of water, the same quantity of fruit and citrus, and then we're going to change up the yeasts. And hopefully we'll see some very interesting changes to that. And what we'll do is we'll document it as we're going to see how it's doing after 1 week, after 2 weeks, and then the flavor compounds and how it all looks at the end. So this should be quite fun. So what we'll do now is we're going to start mixing in the honey and putting in the fruit and getting the yeast all going, and then we'll show you guys how it's looking.
You're back.
I'm back. So I quickly popped out for a few minutes, and when I came back, things were all changed. So tell us, Brian, what were you doing here? What's happened?
Right, so basically, because we wanted to make sure that we get the measurements all exact, I thought with the oranges, we need to do the same. So it doesn't help going along and saying 3 oranges. Meanwhile, one bucket's got 3 big oranges, and the other bucket's got 3 small oranges. So they're all
being weighed out.
Exactly. So I basically weighed the bucket, cut everything up. You'll see in the previous video, cut everything up, weighed out the total contents, divide that out by 5 because there's 5 buckets, and then we portioned it out that each has got exactly. So,
and then there's also some warm water in all these buckets.
Yeah.
How much water is in here?
So there's 3 liters at the moment, but that's just to kind of, it's like lukewarm.
So that's to help us dissolve the honey down.
Dissolve the honey, yeah.
So what we're going to do now, we're going to add the honey to each bucket and make sure that it's all dissolved, and then we'll fill it up with the balanced water and then add the yeast, and then last the oranges.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. So we've got this water is quite cool, and then we'll measure out the honey exactly. Okay. Make sure that each bucket gets the same amount of honey.
Cool. And then we've also got some masking tape which we're going to place on each bucket, and we're going to write on there which yeast we've used in each bucket. One thing that we didn't mention previously is that each yeast also has a different ability to create a certain alcohol content. So some of them can give you a much higher alcohol content and others a much lower one. Yeah. So I can't remember what the actual wording for that is called. It's like a...
Yeah. So the tolerance. The alcohol tolerance, yeah.
Right.
And then also the other thing that we need to just mention is that each yeast has got its own dosage recommendation.
Okay, cool.
So we won't go that each bucket will have like 5 grams of yeast because each type of yeast is different. So we'll go according to their recommendation on the packaging.
So I saw, like, for example, the champagne yeast that said 1 ml per
One gram?
1 gram per liter.
Per liter type thing. Yeah.
So these are all 10-liter buckets, which we're going to do. All of these will be 10 liters.
Yeah.
And so we'll measure it out according
And
to that.
we'll hydrate the yeast before we actually put them in. So we'll use like
so
a
that
little
it
measuring.
activates it.
Exactly.
In a lukewarm water.
Maybe like 500 mils or something like that, and then we can actually
Cool.
add them in. The other thing is with that yeast, we must remember that now the bread yeast doesn't have a recommendation. But I think what we must do is just use according to what we've used in the past. Yeah. Our award-winning mead. Hey,
Yes.
2003, the best mead in Africa.
That's it.
Fantastic.
Okay, so yeah, let's get going with that. We're going to mix in the honeys and get all those things going, and and then we'll show you as we move on. Okay, so we're measuring out 3.8 kilograms for each bucket. Ooh, yummy. Okay, slowly, we're getting close. It's 2.4. Can you see the thing?
Yeah, 3.4.
Okay, go up. Okay, it's slightly over, but then we're just going to take some out, so that's fine.
So the 3.8, you simply just swap the buckets, huh?
Yeah, they've all been sterilized, so.
And add the water to the honey.
And remember, this is warm water, so we've decided we're gonna do all the honeys and then we'll mix everything. Okay, next one. So what we've done now, we've added the honey, we've mixed them all, made sure it's all diluted. And
They all exactly got the same.
all exactly the same, and they've cooled a little bit, so they're like lukewarm.
Yeah, and what was 3.8.
We put 3.8 kgs of honey of the same honey into all the buckets, and they're all sitting with
6 liters.
6 liters of water.
Water, and all the water's been boiled and it
Boiled
cooled.
and cooled, yeah. Okay, so now what we've done is we've worked out for the number of liters of liquid here, how much yeast of each type we need to add. And what we're going to do is we're going to weigh it out on the scale and tip it into a little jar of warm water to basically rehydrate the yeast first. Once we've left it for 15 minutes, then what we'll do is we'll take a little bit of the honey water liquid and mix it in with the yeast liquid before transferring everything in.
That's so that the yeast doesn't get shock treatment.
Exactly. And also that way the sugars help to activate the yeast a little bit.
Now, some of the yeast you don't actually need to rehydrate, that they say on the packaging, but we're going to treat everything all the same.
Treating everything all exactly the same, so that we can't say, oh, but that one didn't do that because of
100%.
Okay. So for this experiment, everything's getting the same treatment.
Same treatment.
Okay, so we've got our thing on 0. Let's start with, we're going to start with the cider yeast.
Okay.
Okay. So this one we need 4 grams. Right. So we're putting it into a bowl and not directly into the water, because if a blob comes out, we can't put it back then.
Yeah, obviously zeroed the...
Yeah, and you need to make sure that you're using a scale that can take just 1 gram. Yeah. So there it is, 4 grams. Oh, I've moved the table. Oh, come on. Okay, 4 grams.
Yeah, fantastic.
All right, so we're going to put that in there, and we're going to leave this yeast packet there so that we know which ones we've added to where. Okay.
Good.
Good.
Right, next one is the... There's no yeast there.
No yeast in there.
Right, so the next one is the wine yeast. I think that is also 4 grams. I'll just double check. Yeah, also 4 grams of the wine yeast.
Okay, so 4 grams of this one. Okay, 4 grams. Okay. Right, next one's the champagne yeast.
And champagne yeast we are doing, just check in the book, 10 grams. How many grams in that packet?
50 grams.
Okay.
Okay, I always just want to make sure it's on and 0 each time. Okay, so 10 grams of this one. 3, quite a bit more, hey?
Yeah.
7, 8.
But if you have a look at the Anchors one, that's like 20 grams. So just, I think it's all yeast specific.
There we go, 10 grams. Okay.
And that's the champagne yeast, huh?
Champagne yeast.
Perfect.
Right, and then the brewer's yeast.
Okay.
This one's well known in South Africa.
Well known for.
Over lockdown, we were all making pineapple beer and cider and all kinds of strange things with it. Yeah. Okay. What's the grammage for this?
We are doing 20 grams. If I'm
20 grams. So actually, This packet is 20 grams.
Anchor's Yeast, yeah, 20 grams. And then also the instant.
Oops.
There you go, fantastic.
Okay.
Got 20 grams of that.
20 grams. And then the...
Quite a bit more coarse than the other stuff.
And the brewer's yeast, the Anchor yeast.
Also 20 grams.
Also 20 grams.
It's,
and these packets are each 10 grams, so
okay.
you can just do 2 packets.
Throw the whole pack in.
And that's very, very fine granules in colors.
Let's have a look there. So that's instant bread yeast, huh?
Yep.
And then that's the brewer's yeast. Quite big little balls. And then that was the champagne yeast. Quite interesting. There's more the like longer shapes. That's also that's the wine yeast. And then the very fine one seems to be the cider. That's already sunk. So, right, so we're going to stir it up, and then you're going to rinse a spoon in between each new spoons. Okay, you're obviously sterilizing them. There you go. So each one will have its own little spoon.
The reason I say each one of its own, you see how it clumps onto the spoon, and we don't want to lose any of it in rinsing it off. So.
Okay. Okay, goes with that one.
Okay.
Alright. It was the brewer's yeast, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now we're going to leave it for 15 minutes and just let it bubble up and do its thing. And then we'll add some honey liquid to it before we add it to the main thing. And then we'll just add the oranges, and then we'll do a test with the hydrometer, starting gravity, and then we're ready to close it up and let it do its thing.
Fantastic.
Yippee!
Good. We'll see you back in 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on part 2. Coming soon.